Hello, Serie A fan. We come to you after a sad week for world football. We'll do our best to pay tributes to the legend that is Diego Maradona, including speaking to a lifelong Napoli fan. We'll also discuss Napoli's performance and round up the rest of the week's action, as Milan go 5 points clear and the Ronaldo-less Juve stutter, in this special episode of Scudetto. Hello, Serie A fan, and welcome to Scudetto. We've got a very special episode for you tonight because, like all football fans and Serie A and Napoli fans in particular, we were incredibly saddened to learn of the death of Maradona at 60 last week. True legend of the game, obviously, and an absolute god in Naples. So in part two, we're going to be talking to lifelong Napoli fan Marco Postiglione, who was at the memorial service in Napoli last week. And we'll also be sharing some of our own memories of watching Diego. So that's part two. And for that reason, we've got a slightly truncated part one, a little bit of a change to the format, but the panel is unchanged. Kenny, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Oscar. I'm good. How are you?
I am all right. Thank you very much. Tell us about your civilized beer.
Oh, my civilized beer. Today I'm not messing around with any of these fruity ones today. I've decided that I'm just going to go for something that I'm fairly confident I'm going to like. I've got a Brewdog Hazy Jane, and it's a New England IPA, straight down the line, 5%er. Looking forward to it.
Sounds like a solid choice. Boaz, welcome. How are you going on?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. I know you've stocked up on IPAs for this evening. Which one have you picked out?
I can actually say this on air because my girlfriend never listens to the pod, but I went out to buy her a birthday present and ended up coming home with 10 new beers. So I should be sorted for at least the next 3 or 4 podcasts. But for today, I'm having a Dancing Camel Patriot American Pale Ale. It's I've had it poured in a pint before, so it's the first time I see the branding, and they've gone for a classic American flag. So at least it tastes good.
And did you get a present?
No, I couldn't find anything.
Oh, no.
As I said, it's a good thing she doesn't listen to the podcast.
Did you pick out 10 beers as a tribute to Diego, or was that just coincidental?
I actually picked out 9 beers, and I WhatsApped you guys saying I've got 9 new beers, and someone said, why don't you get 10 as a tribute to Diego? And so I picked another random IPA, and the guys were a little bit fazed by the fact that I pretty much bought every single IPA they had in the shop.
Fantastic news. Well, I've done better than last week. I have actually got a beer this evening, you'll be pleased to know, Kenny. It's actually the one I was intending to drink last week. It's called a Slow Smoked Santa, and the can is, as usual, magnificent. It's from this brewery, the Puniki Brewery near Helsinki, and it's got a sort of I guess it's a sort of mosaic image of Santa with his legs in the air sticking out of a chimney.
It's very cool.
You should have kept that one for our Christmas piss up.
Yeah, good point. I mean, I was actually looking at the shelf. There are a lot of Christmas beers that I can try out, so don't worry, that has not been exhausted. Anyway, so that's beers out of the way. Let's move on to the football, starting with Inter, who won 3-0 away at Sassuolo, but Sassuolo sort of gave Inter a 2-goal head start, didn't they, Kenny? It was they made it quite easy for them.
Yeah, they did. I mean, I think this was one of the games that we were all looking forward to coming into the weekend, and I'm not sure what happened. We kind of said that, or I said that this was an opportunity for Sassuolo really to kind of throw their hats in the ring for a Champions League spot. If that's what this occasion was, then arguably they failed that test. Having said that, Inter did look good. Lautaro in particular was on fire, but I just don't really know what to make of Inter. I mean, you watch them in midweek and they're a calamity. You watch them at the weekend, and yeah, they pull out a result like this against the second team in the league. But yeah, good win for them.
Yeah, I mean, I've said on here before that we shouldn't criticize Sassuolo too much for defending badly, because obviously the way that they play does kind of mean there'll be holes. But having said that, I mean, that performance from Kirikes Boaz was it was bad, wasn't it?
I feel sorry for him because we gave him a shout out a few weeks ago, and he's obviously a listener, and he got a little bit excited. He's
Obviously.
definitely he's very much to blame for the first goal, which was calamitous. He both mishits a ball right at the beginning, and then he has a couple of chances to make amends, but both times he kind of slips over himself, kicks the ball in the air, basically disaster. And then he scores an own goal for the second one. And to kind of put a cherry on top, he gets injured in the 40th minute and comes off. So not the best day for poor Vlad.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but that is the kind of the Kirikes that we remember from his time at Tottenham, really, isn't it, Kenny?
Yeah. He kind of looked a bit like a turtle on his back in the first goal, I think. Just his legs kind of going away while he couldn't do anything else to control himself.
It was slightly comical.
Yeah, not a game to remember for him, I don't think.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Inter, though, because, Buzz, you mentioned this before, but why is Conte always angry when Inter win and happy when they lose? Do you think this is some sort of a mind game?
So I think this has coincided with Inter losing or not winning quite a number of games in a row. I guess to sugarcoat it or some other mind games, Antonio decided that the best course of action was to become kind of a vanilla zombie. It was really disheartening. I didn't recognize him, and the things he was saying after major losses and disappointing, or dare I say even embarrassing outings, where things like the team is playing well, we're all going in the same direction. And now that he's finally winning a few games, he started having a go at the press. He's been very aggro in his last two interviews, and he seems to want us to ignore the fact that they had a terrible game against a Real Madrid side that was missing some of its best players in midweek, and essentially they're out of Europe with 2 games left.
Yeah, you're right. It almost seems like some kind of a strange defense mechanism, doesn't it? I mean, I highlighted Mourinho doing the same thing in reverse after a goalless draw at Chelsea, where he was telling the press that, yeah, I'm not happy with this result, with a massive grin across his face. Always funny when managers try that sort of.
So you kind of alluded to Mourinho, and in many ways, I think Conte is kind of a dollar store Mourinho in the sense that he maybe doesn't have the same trophy cabinet, apart from the leagues he won with Chelsea and Juventus. Of course, he's never won in Europe. But more to the point, his whole act is a lot less calculated than Mourinho's in my mind. And it's always a bit strange because ultimately he could just let his football do the talking.
Yeah, he does have some fans, though. I know Kenny possibly not among them, but the owners of Inter, one of the Jangs was vocally supporting him after the game, wasn't he?
I don't dislike Conte. I find him perplexing in the same way that I guess you guys do. But yeah, so this is a comment. This is before the weekend result, in response to the Real Madrid result, where they basically came out and said they named him on sort of first name basis. They were talking about Antonio rather than Conte. And they were basically saying so long as the club is pulling in the right direction, so long as there's progress season on season, then, you know, everyone's happy. The problem I have with this is that very obviously there isn't progress season on season, because they're, as Boaz just said, they're out of Europe. They're out of the Champions League again. The only way they can improve on last season in Europe is by winning the Europa League. We don't even know yet if they're going to be in the Europa League, although I suspect they probably will. But domestically as well, the only way to improve on last season is to win the league. And the way they're playing at the moment, the inconsistency that they're showing, I don't think that they're going to do that. I did have them down at the beginning of the season as being my favourites, but I don't think that's the case anymore. Having said that, I don't actually know who my favourites are at this point.
And it has to be said that the league is very tight at the moment. So even Inter, even Juventus, who are behind, anything can happen. People can drop points. But going back to what we said at the very start of this segment, an angry Conte is equal to a winning Conte. So I'm sure if you're an Inter fan, you might be quite pleased to see that angry Conte is back, and maybe that kind of translates into more aggression, more voglia di vincere on the pitch. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, we'll talk more about kind of title favourites when we discuss some of the other teams in that race in a little bit. We've got one more talking point on Inter, actually. Inter fans will be happy with paying them back for the 20 minutes we spoke about Milan last week. But just because it was quite controversial, that Vidal red card in the Champions League game last week looked like, I mean, it was two very quick yellow cards, actually, that were issued by Anthony Taylor, first for protesting a decision and then continuing to protest a decision. What did you make of that, Kenny?
I was actually going to give Anthony Taylor a dishonourable mention for this, but apparently our rules forbid it. So here we are speaking about it in the main section instead. I think it's pathetic refereeing. If what has been reported to have been said by Vidal is actually what was said, then I think I don't see any way that that's a reason to send the player off. So the first thing to say on this, I think, is that the referee got the decision right. Actually, the so-say penalty or no penalty on Vidal. I think the defender gets there and gets a nick on the ball. But the issue I have is that Vidal then goes and protests quite aggressively, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, he gets a yellow card, and it's right that he gets a yellow card for that. The problem is that afterwards, Anthony Taylor completely loses control of the situation, and just because he continues to protest, and I think also because there are other Inter players around him continuing the protest, he decides to whip out another yellow card and send him off. And what reportedly has been said is that he said, they give you VAR to check this shit and still I get nothing. And that warrants a second yellow and a sending off. I think any reasonable referee, a good referee, a referee who knows that their job is equally about managing a game rather than just punishing players and calling free kicks, takes him aside, says to him, look, I've just booked you, calm down. If I have to book you again, then obviously you've got to go off. And I think that diffuses the situation. He doesn't do that. He just immediately
see what you're saying.
I do
see what you're saying. And I agree that maybe have been managed better by the referee, but I just think it's brainless from Vidal. And I think if you react like that to a referee, an experienced player like Vidal as well, you know that you're running the risk of getting sent off. Not only does he continue to protest to Anthony Taylor, he puts his forehead into Anthony Taylor's face while, as you say, he's surrounded by other Inter players. I think you're asking to go at that point.
I don't actually see him doing that. I mean, I watched it again after you said this to me. I see that he still kind of faces off against him. But I think, look, I know that he's very, very highly regarded, but Collina, for example, would have just given him the death stare and that would have been the end of it. Vidal is obviously very agitated at that point, and that's why he keeps going on. It needs someone who's managing the game.
His haircut that gets him sent off, if anything. He just looks aggressive.
I think Boaz wanted to come in on this as well.
Yeah, Boaz, what do you think?
I probably don't feel as strongly as either of you in this circumstance. So what I will say is that this is possibly a case where Vidal's reputation preceded him, and that Anthony Taylor recognized this player who has a name for being slightly aggressive, slightly above the law, let's say, and so therefore he wanted to show his dominance. I think it's a bit of a ego trip, but Vidal should have known better.
Yeah, anyway, we now talked about Inter for almost as long as we talked about Milan last week, so let's move on. And Milan, a good result for them. They beat Fiorentina 2-0. Perhaps we were expecting a bit of a new manager bounce for Fiorentina. They didn't get it, did they, Boaz? But Milan showed that they can do it without Zlatan. Yeah,
this game was pretty much wrapped up by the end of the first half. Milan had 17 shots to Fiorentina's 4 or 5 in the whole game. Overall, a deserved victory and a great performance, considering, as you said, that Zlatan was missing. This result means that Milan have now gone 29 games scoring consecutively in the league, which is they've equaled their all-time record. They've also scored 2 or more goals in 11 or more occasions in a row, which is also a club record. And as you said, Zlatan was missing, but their win record without Zlatan goes up to about 82%. So this is one of those games that definitely allows some, let's call them squad players, to grow in confidence. For example, Tonali, who replaced Benacer, and Rebic, who is back from a long-term injury. I love to be the one who raises a polemical point about my own club, but there were two very soft penalties in this game in my mind. I don't know if you guys saw them. The first penalty Milan were assigned was Selemacher was through on goal, and he manages to get a shot off, but as he gets the shot off, he gets kicked in the foot. This is one of those eternal questions in football. You're kind of in fury? You're allowed to do whatever you want to a player after he's taken a shot. You can lynch him, you can smash his legs, but in this case, the ref was very much by the book.
It's the one that Cassie scored.
Yeah, this is the first one. I've heard people, professional refs and people who have opinions about this kind of stuff, have no argument about this penalty, but I think maybe if I was a Fiorentina fan, I'd be a little bit angry. And the second one, this is the one where actually former refs and a few Italian journalists felt that this was not a penalty. Again, there's a through ball in, and Theo Hernandez is in the area, and he turns on the ball, and there's the Fiorentina player slightly puts his hands on him, and he goes down. The media in Italy felt that both players were holding each other's shirt, but for me, it was kind of obvious that his movement was stopped. Having said that, Kessie missed the penalty, and so it doesn't really matter. And again,
So I was just going to say he's got an even worse conversion rate than Zlatan now in Serie A.
So I was going to say that the penalties are becoming a real issue for Milan, and of course, in a game like this where it was kind of easy, that's not a problem. But I think really, both of Kessie's penalties were very, very softly taken. That's cool if you're hitting the target and the goalkeeper is going the other way. But as soon as the goalkeeper jumps in the right direction, he's going to stop those.
Who would you give them to, out of interest? Theo Hernandez just blast it down the middle.
I mean, last year, Kessie was blasting them. And so I'm not sure why he's decided that he's now doing this really slow run-up and trying to place them. And he's not even placing them too well. So again, maybe I give it to someone who can smash it. I'm a real fan of penalties that are hit with venom.
To me, in the first penalty, he waits to see where Dąbrowski dives, and that's why he's slow. I think he's keeping an eye on that. The problem is that works once. The second time, the goalkeeper just waits to move, because while yes, when the goalkeeper moves, it's easier to, you've got more of the goal to aim at. You know what direction the open goal is, basically. It's also more difficult to accurately find the corners, and I think he called his bluff on the second one, and that's why it was relatively easy for him to stop it.
Kessie did say he will take the next penalty.
Did he? I was going to say maybe there's a case for having different ways of taking penalties, not just different directions. But and I thought both were penalties, actually. The first one, I have no problem with. I think there's definite contact, and it can very probably had an impact on the effort. It was Salemaker's, was it? The first one, yeah. You said was, yeah. The second one, I think it's Caceres, was it, who put his arm out. I think he pretty much he impedes him. He quite clearly impedes Theo Hernandez. For me, I think that's a penalty as well. I'm not a Milan fan, and I quite like Fiorentina, despite the Iachini year.
Were you expecting more from Prandelli, Kenny?
Well, they won against Udinese in the Coppa Italia. I don't think with Milan in the state they're in, I don't think you can expect to necessarily take anything from that game. Milan are 5 points clear at the top of the league for a reason. And the first game, he had the squad for all of about 3 days after the international break, really. So I think it's a bit early to judge, really. I think he's not had the easiest of situations to walk into. Ask me again maybe in a couple of weeks, but I wouldn't say I was expecting more from these 3 games. They got through, albeit in extra time, against Udinese in the Coppa, so that's successful. I wouldn't have expected them to take anything from Milan, and like I said, the first game they didn't have any time to prepare.
And Fiorentina did have a couple of chances eventually in this game. They did hit the bar with Vlahovic, and Ribéry was 1-on-1 with the keeper, and he tried a chip. in both situations, Donnarumma was immense, and possibly with a lesser keeper, that those would have been goals, and we'd be talking about a different game here.
Kenny, you mentioned that Milan are 5 points clear at the top, and obviously it's a strange timeline to the season. We're only a quarter of the way through, whereas normally now we'd be, looking at who's going to be winter champions. But if anyone's favourites, Milan have got to be up there, surely.
Yeah, I said quite early on in the season that I wouldn't be surprised if Milan were challenging for the title. I am surprised that they're in this position at this time, but I think I said it last week, and it's more the case this week. At a certain point, you've got to speak about them being title contenders. They're 5 points clear with a quarter of the season gone. They've played 4 of the other sides that are placed in the top 9, the same as Inter have. They look good. They can win without Ibrahimovic. And another thing is that even when Ibrahimovic is gone, I think you feel his presence. I think he's got so much influence. What happens on the training field at Milan, the players are coming on leaps and bounds, and people like Leao, who maybe was short of confidence before, he's obviously put an arm around him, reassured him, given him some tips, given him advice, and I think that translates into what you see when he's not around as well. There's more belief to this squad since Ibrahimovic came on, and that's true whether he's on the field or not.
Perhaps the best example of that is Calabria, who we've mentioned a few times. He was definitely on his way out. He was booed by fans. He became a kind of a punchline for a lot of rival fans, and now he's playing phenomenally, and he debuted for Italy for the first time in the last international break. So that's a player who went from really night and day, the differences.
Yeah, and speaking of players with a big presence, let's talk about Juve, who've dropped more points at Benevento. Ronaldo left out, rested by Pirlo. Was that the right call? What do you think, Kenny?
So Pirlo said it wasn't a surprise that Ronaldo was left out. Pirlo said that Ronaldo needed a rest before this game. He also said that I think he'd picked up a knock in training beforehand. I mean, he's going to have to rest at some point. The question, I guess, is why not rest him for the Champions League game, given that Juve are pretty much through. When this league game, obviously, every point counts at the end of the season. You tally them all up. It's a big worry, I think, for Juve that they seem so dependent on Ronaldo, more so than Milan are dependent on Ibrahimovic, as I mentioned, more so than Inter are dependent on Lukaku. I would say that's a big worry. And he is right that at some point they have to be able to turn out. They're Juve. They've got the biggest playing budget. Their squad has the biggest budget in the league. They should be able to win games against newly promoted sides without Cristiano Ronaldo in the team. That said, Pirlo said in the press conference afterwards that the team, he said it's a young team, but it didn't have a lot of character, a lot of personality. I think that's fair comment. Yeah, they need to turn it on, really, if they're going to get that 10th title in a row, because Milan are just getting further and further away. And if Inter start putting in a string of victories, then it'll be too late.
Performances, enraging to Antonio Conte.
Yeah, start infuriating Conte by winning too much, then it might be too late for Juve.
Indeed.
And there were already worrying signs for Juventus in the midweek game against Ferencváros, where it looked like they weren't really that motivated to play well. And bizarrely, this is translated over to the midweek Serie A game. And as Kenny said, these points dropped along the way are accumulating. And obviously, if they'd won this game, then Ronaldo's absence would have been kind of not even a big deal. But seeing him not even be at the stadium and not be on the pitch, and them getting such a terrible result is indicative. I do have to say that Morata's goal was fantastic. Whoa.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolute banger. Okay, we're going to have to race through the rest of the games. Lazio lost at home 3-1 to Udinese after a win in Europe. bit of a strange one, but a great team goal from Udinese for the first one. Spezia 2, Cagliari 2 was apparently a good game, according to Boaz. Have to admit, I didn't watch it. Samp 2, Torino 2 was a draw that really suited neither team, and Atalanta lost at home 2-0 to Verona off the back of a sort of historic victory in the Champions League, actually. And I wanted to give an honourable to Gasperini for getting his revenge on Liverpool. So that kicks off our honourable mentions. Buzz, you wanted to give one to Pavoletti.
Yeah, I want to give a honourable mention to Cagliari striker Pavoletti, who has scored for the first time after 553 days. He had a really bad injury, and also he was left out of the team through his own misdeeds. And so to see him back on the score sheet is great, and he's a real character. He's one of these faces you love to see in Serie A, so good on him.
Some goal as well, wasn't it? I think it was a back heel. I've watched the replay about 3 or 4 times. I think it was a back heel, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a nice way to reintroduce yourself.
And Kenny, you've got an honourable for, we mentioned Donnarumma's save, but it's for keepers in general, because I think Silvestri gets one as well.
Yeah, for Donnarumma and Silvestri, really, for excellent performances. Some of the reflexes on show, absolutely fantastic. And Donnarumma once in particular on, I think it was Frank Ribery who was clean through. And we talk a lot about strikers, about good goals, like the last one that we just discussed. Often we don't give enough credit to the keepers. Silvestri as well at one point made a triple save for Verona against Atalanta. So that's my honourable mention for part 1.
Good stuff. And Buzz, you've got just a couple more. One for Bonucci.
Yeah, there was a survey that went around to discover who was the favorite player in each of the United States. Unsurprisingly, Messi and Ronaldo featured quite heavily, as well as Pulisic, the local hero. But then all the way in South Dakota, Bonucci apparently is the favorite player, which struck me as really bizarre.
I think we need a recount on that one. No? Okay. Buzz, you got one more honourable?
Yeah, I'm going back to the Cagliari Spezia game, and there was a fantastic assist for the goal from Spezia. There was the left back is actually maybe in tribute to Diego Maradona, but he drags the whole defense all over the place and then places a fantastic cross in, which is a great goal. But then straight away, I want to give a dishonorable mention to goal scorer Ghiazzi, who did this bizarre bunny rabbit celebration right after his goal and kind of ruined the whole build-up.
Was there a meaning to that? It was very weird.
We'll find out that it was something really deep, and we were dissing him for doing something, a tribute to his grandpa.
Good stuff. All right, thanks, guys. That's all we've got time for in part 1. We'll be back to talk about Napoli, Roma, and Maradona in part 2.
Hello, Serie A fan. Make Scudetto a part of your weekly football fix. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening platform, and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at ScudettoPod. We'd love to have you on the squad.
Welcome back to part 2. Now, as promised, most of this part is dedicated to Buzz's interview with Marco. Obviously, the subject matter needs no introduction, but anyone that is unfamiliar with Diego's time at Napoli, I'd recommend checking out Asif Kapadia's documentary, Diego Maradona. After the interview, we'll discuss our own memories and stories of watching Diego, and then we'll discuss the Napoli game. Buzz, do you want to introduce your interview?
Yeah, definitely. So Marco Postiglione is a lifelong Napoli fan, and he actually witnessed Diego play quite a few times, including his first ever game. And I thought it would be nice to hear the thoughts of someone who is actually in Naples at the moment and could kind of try and convey the emotions going through the city.
Hi, boss. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
So it's a difficult time now for Napolitan people, but well.
Makes sense. Can you tell us a little bit about what Diego has meant to you and your earliest memories of him?
Wow. I told to a friend last night that a lot of people call Diego as a king, but I don't think so, because when a king die, there is another one. And now in Napoli, in all the world, I think that all the people doesn't need another king, but he was a god and is immortal. I think he's immortal. So
It's definitely a huge loss for Naples, the city, and also Napoli, the club.
yeah, he's a symbol. He was a symbol. He's a symbol. I think he's still alive, and is someone more than a soccer player, more than a. I don't know. How can I say? Because I have to repeat. Always is a god for us.
He's an
But I
icon.
think yeah, more than that.
I was telling my
Yes.
my mother-in-law that he's like Van Gogh, like Beethoven. He's the best of the
Yeah,
best in
yeah,
his field.
yeah. The best character and the best player, I think.
I know you went to I guess I'm going to call it São Paulo, maybe one for the last time, but I know you went there the other day. What did you see there, and what was the atmosphere like?
I think that when I read the news live on Sky TV because we are now in Napoli, we are in red zone, a sort of lockdown, so always on TV, and it was terrible because. I need to see it. I need to breathe because it was terrible. Was a terrible news, and that night was really horrible. But the day after, when I went to the stadium, I don't know how can I say, it was a sort of something good in the air because all the people were there to celebrate Diego, and the atmosphere was magic, was beautiful. I think so. The pain became a sort of serenity. How can I say? And the atmosphere was just like this. We were there in silence, watching all the flowers and everything that the people put on the stadium, and I think it was better than the night before when we had the news.
Makes sense. What is your earliest memory of Diego? I know you saw him live. What is your earliest memory?
My father was a big fan of Naples. My uncle played in Naples in the 60s.
Wow.
So we talk about Napoli in our house since since I was a child. And age 6, my father decided to put me on the scene. So with my brother, we went to the stadium in 1987
Wow.
on March, Napoli against Sampdoria, and it was my first time. And first time Maradona scored a very incredible goal with his head on the grass. Something totally incredible, and I think, he's a magic, he's a magician, and I understood that day that Maradona was something special, something over everything, and it was my first memory, and it is in my mind every day. Every day when I think at that day, I smile, I'm happy, and I started to appreciate soccer and my heart passion for Napoli. Here is very special. You can understand, my friend. Soccer is something special in this city. It's not a thing like others. It's a kind of religion. That's why Diego was a sort of god.
I understand. So I assume you don't have any issues with the renaming of the stadium.
I think it's obvious. After a second, when we had the news that Diego was in the air, his soul was in the air. The first thing all Napolitan people said was, okay, now São Paulo had to change his name in Maradona Arena, Diego Armando Maradona Stadio. It's obvious. It's something that happened immediately. Because we don't need the law, we don't need a rule. It's just like that, just now. And tomorrow, Napoli will play against Rome.
It's a big game.
Big game, very important, yes, for us. because it's we don't know now what Napoli is, but tomorrow maybe we'll have an idea. And so I told about the stadium. It's obvious. It will happen also in Rome when in the next 90 years Totti will leave the planet. I think the Stadio Olimpico will be renamed in Francesco Totti. Maybe only Roman people can understand how Diego was important for us with Francesco Totti. It's a comparison that I don't know if you can.
I quite like that. I never thought about that, but I quite like it.
Yeah. I think it will be the same for them.
And finally, how are you feeling about this season? You touched upon it lightly before.
Well, I think it's a very, very strange season because COVID changed everything in the last season, and now Juventus tie with Benevento. Inter sometimes win, sometimes lose. Napoli scores 4 goals against Atalanta, but then lose against Sassuolo. It's very interesting, I think. And Milan maybe now is the more. It's very a team and a group on its own, and they are so strong because they play together since last season. When Milan choose Ragnik, all the players, maybe Ibrahimovic, the other god, they went around his trainer Pioli, and they make a group. They make just like a rock band. I don't know. They stay together and they started to win. And the Milan company decided to leave Pioli on the bench. And I think Milan now is the more compact group, strong band in Serie A.
Interesting.
I hope that Napoli could be a long-running success, and we hope so. So we hope something good for this season, but I don't know. I still don't know. It's very strange, all strange.
We're big fans of Osimhen on this podcast.
Oh, me too.
He's very excited. I love that he plays with a smile on the pitch and off the pitch.
Yeah, he's a diamond, I think, and he's a good guy with a very hard story in his life, and I hope he will score a lot and make Napolitan people happy.
Definitely.
Just like Careca, Maradona, Cavani, and I don't wanna say with that Argentinian player that we had, Gonzalo, something like
we
that.
won't mention him.
No, I don't remember.
He's retired in Miami right now.
The surname.
He's retired in Miami.
Yeah, so fat.
And
so
a final question before Higuain sues us, but a final question is what's going on with Koulibaly? Because he's been a little bit off the pace. I think maybe he was to blame for one of the goals against Milan. Looks like his head is not switched on this season.
I don't think so. I think that when obviously he's a player that could play in a very top team in Europe, but I think all Napoli team is not playing good, and Koulibaly is one of the best players we have, and I think that he will have a good redemption very, very, very soon.
Well, we hope so. Well, Marco, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And much love to Diego, I guess, from all of us. And much love to the city of Naples, that is a fantastic footballing city. And for me, one of the best places to watch Serie A football.
I want to say another thing about Diego.
Go for it.
Diego was something special. You understand that? But I hope that in the future, Napoli could have another big player, just like, I don't think just like Diego, but something special like him. And Napoli could, I hope in the future, Napoli could win other championships and maybe other European Cups. We have to impress the memory of Maradona in our minds, in our lives. But in the future, we have to go on and do something special, just like happened 30 years ago.
I totally agree. Thanks, Marco.
Okay.
Have a great evening.
Thank you, boss.
Seems like a lovely guy, Marco Boaz. Higuain might have taken a little bit of offence, although he has been called worse by his own club president in the past. But yeah, great to hear from Marco on that. Just before we move on to how Napoli got on this week, anything that either of you want to add to our tribute? My own contribution's quite limited. Never watched him live. Obviously, kind of enjoyed learning about him through old clips and the documentary that I mentioned earlier. Kenny, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I mean, I moved to Italy in 1986, and I was always a football fan. Those first few years, I was obviously very young, but I always remember Trapattoni's Inter, Sacchi's Milan, and Maradona's Napoli. And the fact that it was Maradona's Napoli and Maradona was a player probably tells you how influential he was on the field and off the field. I think the first real memory that I have of seeing him playing regularly was the tournament that moved me from someone who loved football. They say in Hollywood movies, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. So the thing that moved me from loving football to being in love with football was Italia 90, the World Cup in Italy. And in particular, the memories of Maradona, in that I think the ones that stick out for me the most, the one that sticks out for me the most is probably the semi-final against Italy in Naples. It was the first game that Italy played away from Rome in that World Cup, and it was a very tense affair. Scotland were long gone by that time, obviously being the semi-final of a World Cup. So Italy were the team that I was obviously supporting. And I remember that Italy team had Baresi, had Maldini, Baggio came off the bench, had Vialli. There's some real superstars in that Italian side. And yeah, yet again, I think testament to how Maradona carried a lot of teams that he played. Well, Napoli and Argentina really he carried, and I think just how fortunate in Italy we all were basically to witness the pinnacle of Maradona's career. Because I was listening to Italian radio earlier, and the tributes were coming in, and they were saying that Maradona won very little before Napoli and very little afterwards, and Napoli won nothing before Maradona and then won nothing afterwards, and it's not quite true. I mean, they won Coppa Italia obviously last season, but just such a superstar. Who cares if he's the best that's ever played? He was otherworldly when he was playing, and yeah, one of my earliest footballing memories, really, it was always Maradona. Everyone wanted to be Maradona. Everybody got the ball and they're like, Maradona on the ball. Yeah, so lots of memories.
Yeah, lovely tribute there, Kenny, and absolutely must have been insane to be at those games in Napoli. Boaz, did you want to chip in with anything additional before we move on?
So my memories of Diego are also based around Italia 90, although maybe I'm living them vicariously through my father, who at the time traveled all over Italy and caught, I think, about 48 of the 56 games in that World Cup or something crazy like that. And he was both at that semi-final that Kenny mentioned between Italy and Argentina and the final with Germany. So he got to see the great man live. And this is actually probably one of my earliest footballing memories, but I just remember the whole city falling quiet when Diego scored the penalty against Italy, and just how the whole it was like there was bullhorns going on, there was people shouting, there was screams, and then it just went so quiet. Of course, one of my favorite anecdotes that I read in this week about Maradona was that when Napoli won the league for the very first time, a huge banner went up in the local cemetery, and essentially it said, "I can't believe you missed this," or something like that. So Maradona was godly enough to taunt the dead.
Yeah, very fitting. Thanks for that, Boaz. We do need to talk about the game. On paper, a fitting tribute to Maradona, 4-0 victory against Roma. What was the performance like?
I think the performance was, as you said, the fitting tribute. The scoreline didn't flatter Napoli at all, and they showed a wealth of attacking options with 4 different players getting on the score sheet, which is kind of a symmetry that I really like because it shows a complete team performance rather than maybe one star doing all the work. It was nice to see Insigne, with the only local boy in the team, get the goal and a phenomenal free kick, it has to be said as well. There was already memes going around in the Napoli Twitter sphere with kind of Diego whispering into Insigne's ear, "Put it in the bottom corner, put it in the bottom corner." So I like that Diego will forever be part of Napoli folklore. And there's also a great goal from Politano that for me reminded me a lot of kind of five-a-side football, where he wins a ball just outside the area and takes a few small touches, goes past a couple of players, gets the keeper to go to the ground, goes around him as well, and hits it really hard. So it's nice to see that. And there was also a phenomenal team move that resulted in the second goal with the Rui from defense back healing it and getting the ball back, and a lot of interplay. I think on the basis of the way they're currently playing, Napoli are showing some of the best football in Europe. And when they're on their day, they're splendid to watch.
Yeah, Boaz, I think you said to me before, you put it nicely when you said it was a city in mourning, and what better way to lift the spirits than by beating bitter rivals Roma convincingly.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. I don't want to take anything away from the victory, obviously, but Roma really looked a lot worse than they have done in recent weeks. I thought, obviously, you had players out to injury and recovering from COVID, but they just seemed a bit off the pace, didn't they, Baz?
Yeah, it looked like they had a few early chances, and kind of as the game developed, right at the start, it looked like Roma were going to be really into this game. But they soon faded away, and it has to be said that Mirante, who we've praised in the past, particularly against Milan, where he kept the team in the match, he's probably strongly responsible for at least 2 of the goals, if not 3. At the same time, he also made a few crucial saves, so I'm not sure we can completely crucify him. But a rare off day, and as Fonseca said after the game, we weren't the best team in the world before this game, and we're not the worst team in the world right now. But of course, it did feel like they didn't show up, and perhaps a couple of players coming back from COVID, maybe they were slightly off the pace.
Yeah, and you do wonder as well if the kind of emotions of an occasion like that might get to them a little bit. Obviously, the kind of outpouring over Diego, and Napoli obviously extra motivated to get the win from that, and maybe the occasion just slightly overawed them. In terms of positives from Roma, Carlos Perez looked quite good when he came on at the end. Had probably the best chance of the half for Roma, and absolutely, as you say, shouldn't be too discouraged by what's just a bit of a one-off result, maybe.
And the news that Kumbala is now negative to COVID is also good news for the defense. So, I mean, in a week where they got thrashed 4-0, maybe there's a silver lining in there somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Any more points on that game? Otherwise, maybe we'll go back to the beers and see how everyone's got on.
Well, this probably falls into the honorable mentions section, but I think we have to mention the fact that Napoli played this game in the blue and white stripes and black shorts of Argentina, which was a nice fitting tribute as well.
Yeah, in fact, I think we should just give an honourable mention to all of the tributes at all of the games over the weekend to Diego Maradona. We've got a few more honourables and dishonourables for Diego right at the end, but let's just check in on the civilised beers, because we didn't do that in part 1. Kenny, how's the IPA going down?
Yeah, it's really, really, really good. It's nice and smooth, not quite as bitter as the Dead Pony Club. I think that's probably owing to the slightly higher alcohol content and therefore slightly more sugar in there, perhaps. But really nice. Yes, very strong beer, strong in a level of quality rather than level of strength sense.
You've kept the same adjective, but you've changed the modifier there. So
I'm trying to stay away from it.
Boaz, how about you?
I usually have this beer at my local, and it's usually quite flat. And now that I've had it in the bottle for the first time, it tastes great. So I'm thinking I'm gonna change my local and keep drinking this beer bottled.
Good stuff. So the slow smoked Santa dark lager is going down pretty well. I've been getting into the dark lagers actually. I don't know if it's a consequence of having had COVID and my taste buds are slightly dulled, but I quite like these malty tastes a bit more than I did before. Or maybe I'm just maturing. 30 this week.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Anyway, that's enough about my beer. Let's do a few more honourables and dishonourables, and we'll wrap up. Boaz, you want to kick us off with a dishonourable for Cabrini?
Yeah, maybe we'll do the negative ones first, since this episode is supposed to be a joyous affair. But I did want to give a dishonourable mention to Juve legend Cabrini, who had the temerity to say that had Diego Maradona played for Juventus, he'd still be alive nowadays. Now, leaving aside the fact that Diego Maradona left Napoli many, many moons ago, and so it's really irrelevant whether he lived in Naples or not. But also, I think even if you think this, now is not the right time to express these opinions, particularly as Napoli and Juventus in the modern day are at loggerheads more so than they were even back then.
Yeah, not in very good taste.
Definitely not.
To keep all our negative points in one compact spot, I will also give a slight dishonorable to the burial of Diego Maradona. There was a Boca Juniors shirt and Argentina shirt on his grave, and I just felt on his casket, and I just felt that after 7 years at Napoli, maybe a Napoli shirt would have been fitting there as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be arguing with whoever made the decision, but I definitely see your point.
I'm not sure who I'm attributing this dishonorable to. It's just out there now.
Can we just make it an honourable towards the idea that there could have been a Napoli shirt?
It's a nice idea, yeah.
Okay.
But moving on to positive things.
Kenny, finishing on a positive note, you've got an honourable.
I've got an honourable for Gattuso, yes, who in the post-match press conference after that game said, I think he did it very well as well. He basically said, I understand the way the city's feeling right now. Diego Maradona is a legend, and I understand the air that you're all breathing right now, but I see too many people out at these events, these mass gatherings, without wearing any masks, without observing any form of social distancing, and we've got to be careful because this thing is still out there, and if we aren't careful, then we'll all pay for it. And I do think that's very important, and I think that in the position that Gattuso's in, it's good that he says that. I noted after the Coppa Italia victory, there was scenes of jubilation in the station in Naples, no one observing any sort of social distancing or anything there. It's good to celebrate victories, and it's good to celebrate the lives of arguably the best footballer of all time. But the virus doesn't really care about things like that. So good on Gattuso for saying that.
Yeah, safety first as always from Gattuso, at least as a player, maybe as a manager, is a little bit more forward thinking. Anyway, that's all we've got time for this week. Please do subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your audio. We'll speak to you next week. Until then, enjoy the football.
Che sta decretando lo scudetto del Milan in questo preciso istante. La Juventus è campione d'Italia questa data, il 6 maggio.